All right, everybody. Hey, it's another Thursday, another Webflow SEO live stream. And today we have a very interesting topic. I'm really excited, and the guest is none other than Hilary. Hey, Hilary.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to be here. I think I was my first ever live stream was a guest on your community kind of live stream. So I'm really excited to give back the favor and just say hi.
Thank you.
So let's do a quick intro for Hilary. I'm just gonna share the screen real quick and then we can arrive. So yeah. So for those who don't know, Hilary runs UX Vocab Club. Do you say vocabulary or just vocab, or how do you pronounce the name?
It started off as Hilary Cluett's UX Vocabulary Club, but then when I went through a few iterations, at one point, one of the suggestions was UX Vocab Club, and people were just like, "Oh, that's so cool!" And I find it's hard for Spanish speakers to say, but everyone else seems like it's okay. So it's the UX Vocab Club.
Okay, vocab.
Bit of a tongue twister, but
yeah, I mean it's not a tongue twister. It's more of a just an unusual word, but at the same time, it kind of differentiates it from anything else. So for those who don't know, Hilary runs a very big UX professional community, and it's only UX or in general just design.
Well, I've decided to focus on user experience and any professional who kind of touches user experience. So it could be like content, interface, design. Just it's a niche, but it's a big topic, So I'm focusing on UX, but I do actually talk with a lot of engineers, a lot of developers, SEO experts, like people who are interested and who kind of have this relationship with UX, but they're not really sure what it is. A lot of them will come to me and they're like, "Hey, I'm totally interested in this thing. Like, what is UX?" I'm like, "Okay, let's start there." So I've specialized in user experience, but yeah, anyone's really welcome. So
anybody is welcome. So that's the important part. That's really cool. And we're gonna get into how this grew and how you came up with this idea and what you did before. But before that, a little bit later. But before that, I just wanted to show everybody who's never saw what you guys do that you focus. You have a newsletter and you guys have a community that you work on, right? And then you try to help your community flourish as professionals. Am I putting this right, or am I butchering the idea?
Nope, you got it.
Yeah, and you also do one-on-one coaching, right? That's also another thing that also happens. Okay, so we're gonna touch all of that soon. And then last but not least, all the links are in the description. If you want to follow Hilary on Twitter, if you want to find them on LinkedIn, just visit their website or even get one-on-one coaching. Feel free to use them. I added one here, but in general, you can find everything in the description. That being said, Hilary, so the first question, what did you do before you started UX Vocab Club? What life was about? What was the career? What did you do? Give us the short version, or if you feel like it, you can give us the long one if you want.
I'll try and give the long version in a condensed way. So, and someone's saying the sound is echoing. Is it me that's echoing? I'm not sure how to change that if it is me that's echoing. I hope it's not.
Check that for one.
Echo. No.
Seems like it should be okay.
It's
I just checked on YouTube,
okay.
Right? Just let us know if that's really happening. Should not be happening, but let us know, and also let us know if you can hear cars passing by through my window. Then I'm gonna also try to do something about it. All right. So coming back to the topic.
Big question.
The question.
Okay, so basically, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit since I was like really little. I've always been designing things or making things or painting things or telling people what to do. Started dog walking businesses, babysitting clubs, was a lifeguard, all that stuff. And then when I was in high school, so grade 10, I was finding it really difficult because I was constantly getting kicked out of class for asking lots of questions. So my parents hooked me up with one of their friends who was running a marketing agency at the time, and their agency differentiated themselves because they were actually collecting lots of data, like in-person data. So it wasn't just like, oh, hey, here's a promotion. We'd actually they would wheel in these massive computer bricks and the banks, like computer banks, and we'd be they would collect data from 2,000 different participants in a mall. They would put them through this experience, whatever it was, if it was for phones or chocolate or Dove products, whatever it was, they would put them through this experience. And then the ambassadors would have to relay to the CEOs and to the heads what that experience looked like. What were the key words? What were, what did they like? What didn't they like? What were they struggling with? And so I got that job at 15. I was way too young to have the job. My first role was actually at a beer festival. So in Canada, the legal age is 19. So I was the youngest person on this beer festival. And basically because I knew the manager, she just said don't put your age down. It's fine. And it would allow me to actually get out of class. So I spent a lot of time on the road from, 15 to 17. And I would just kind of show up at school when there was a presentation or when I had to write a test, a quiz, or an exam or something like that. That's when I would kind of show up. And I graduated with honors, no problem there. But it really opened my eyes to this really cool world of sharing ideas, getting feedback, curating experiences, and, talking about how something's working and what's not working, and relaying that information to the C-suite or to product owners or whoever it was. And actually by 17, I was in charge of, the southern part of my province. And I was going around and checking on, 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds who were running the experiences. I was secret shopping them, but then also checking them and making sure that they were doing it, within brand guidelines, that they were reporting correctly, because I had such great success with it. So, and I would always do it differently. I'd take all the products off the shelves and put them on my display and share the products, be showing them how I put on the cream and putting them out there, and getting providing really good feedback to the higher ups. So they really appreciated that. And then I was getting compensated well at a really young age, and so I just thought that was great. And I continued that throughout, some of my university careers. I've been to a few different universities. I don't have a degree, but I've been to 4 different universities. I've sampled a lot. So I went down to Dalhousie University in the East Coast in Canada. And I was doing journalism and economics, and then started dabbling in French. And I was really struggling because it was in 2006 to 2009 that I was down there doing journalism. And that's kind of when social media and Facebook and the blog and vloggers started to become a thing. And they weren't really teaching that in journalism school. And so I was, again, struggling with my teachers, I was asking hard questions and they were telling me to shut up. And so I was learning about journalism, learning how to, provide information, how to be succinct with information, how to gather it, do the research and share it, but then understanding that actually the journalists are really controlled by certain aspects, there's 2 companies in Canada that kind of control all of our journalism. And so that really, I wasn't really into that. And I kept asking okay, but what about the web? Like, what about these people who don't have all of these constraints? They're going to start to share their opinions, and you're telling us that we can't compete because we have our hands tied. And this is really frustrating for me. So after a conversation, with the deans and with all the people, I just decided, this isn't for me. I'm going to leave. And I ended up coming back to Toronto and doing more of this ambassador, which is technically UX research, right? Doing a lot more UX research for different companies. And then that took me out west. So the complete opposite coast of Canada, out to UBC.
Okay.
And then I was like, you know what? I just want to cook. I'm sick of all of this stuff. I'm just going to cook. And so I applied and got into a culinary school. But I also applied to and got into the University of British Columbia at the same time. And it was basically a cost thing. The one was like 30 grand and the other was like 13. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go back to school. And at that time I just did languages because I was like, honestly, I really love talking to people. I really love traveling. And if I can travel, then I can learn to cook abroad. So this is my mindset. I was still making things. Like I had like a little card business on the side. I always made my clothes. Like people would buy like random stuff from me all the time, like crowns. I was doing whatever. But I started focusing on languages. So I was taking French, Italian, and Spanish all at the same time, which was insane. Like Spanish was blue ink, Italian was black ink. And that's how I differentiated in my notes, like how to do it. Because I was joining those kind of at the same level. So that was really great. A lot of I was going in, I was like 22, maybe 23 at the time. And so a lot of the other students were much younger. It was their first university. So they weren't kind of as bold as I was in the classroom. And one of my best friends from middle school was actually there in a few of my classes. So her and I were just having a great time. And the teachers would always have these like wine and cheese gatherings, and none of the students would go, but we were allowed to go. And so I started just going and showing up to all these wine and cheese gatherings with all of the professors and chatting my way through, like talking to them about what they're working on, enjoying cheese, enjoying wine. And so a lot of my classmates started looking up to me for, how to talk to professors, how to just be charismatic. And I ended up winning an award there for, I honestly can't remember what it was for. I just showed up and they're like, here you go, here's some cash, you did great. And I was like, oh, thank you. So it's kind of
for something.
Yeah, I actually thought when I was going to the place, like I thought that I owed them money, like because I didn't really read the email, and I always, you always owe the school money. So I was like, oh man, I owe them money. I show up and I was like, hi, I'm Hilary. I'm here for something. And they were like, yeah, we have your award here. I was like, award? What do I have to do for it? And they were like, no, you've done it. We like, here you go. Here you go. Here's your check. It's like, oh, okay. And I turned to my friend. I'm like, run, go. Like, let's get out of here before they change their mind. Because for me, school was always this place where people get angry at me. And like, I was always in trouble because I was always asking too many questions, or like going outside of the scope, or negotiating that curriculum at the beginning. You know how they give you that rubric? I'd be like, okay, I see that like you want me to demonstrate these abilities, like, and I see that this is the project that you've suggested. That's awesome. Suggested, right? Like, and I would prefer to do it this way. Like, what do you think? And so I'd always be negotiating these things, and students kind of caught on to that. And I'd always be helping them. So like helping them with their resumes, helping them with talking to their teachers, helping them renegotiate their marks, helping them literally with everything. And I never felt like that was something that was like a skill. It was just me. And so when some tragedy struck and I had to come back to Ontario, and I was kind of like, oh man, like what am I going to do? So I ended up getting a few jobs. So I was working at 2 different art galleries, and at the same time working as the only cook. I don't want to say chef because like I'm not trained, but like the only cook at a French restaurant, like a gluten-free restaurant downtown. And those 2 experiences, like selling art and selling people's designs and jewelry and all of that, and then also working with tools in a kitchen that were, not necessarily like like, you know, when you like hold a knife for too long, like you get blisters. Like I was starting to understand like user experience from like a different standpoint. And then I got a job working at the hospital doing their database administration. So they needed like all these patient files translated into digital content. And that was like, they had like 7,000 patients, but they'd have each file 3 times. So there are 21,000 files like in all these boxes. And it was my job to develop this system so that, you know, the surgeons and the doctors and all the teams, so like the psychologists, the physiotherapists, everybody could input these forms that they were just like basically scribbling on pages into some sort of digital structure. And then when it wasn't working, catching those things that weren't working, keeping a log of them, which I wasn't like necessarily supposed to do, but I was keeping a log. And then when they started doing the training for us on this new system that all this information was going into, I started talking with the engineers and with the kind of the product owner of this new system. And so I ended up becoming some super user who was then helping make the forms so that they could go in, preventing errors, right? So like we created like a section with a barcode and like doing all this stuff so that the form, like it because this is patient data, like this is like people who have had like their limbs cut off and they need a new arm kind of thing. Like this is like really intense. And so then that was the corporate side of it, right? Like seeing how this flow and how to prevent errors and how to prevent, you know, other customer service reps from typing in wrong information and all of that. Like I had a really good eye for catching errors, basically. So there was that side, but then there's also the side of being at the front desk and seeing the patients come in and seeing them in their rehabilitation journey. And that just like, that to me, I was like, this person has new legs. Like this is amazing. And now they're learning how to use these legs. Like what is going on here? And so between those 3 experiences, the art gallery, the working as a cook and working at this hospital, I basically decided like, I want to make things. I want to make better metal things. I want to learn how to 3D print stuff. I want to like be involved in this. So I just walked into this like random building down the street, which it was a university. Like first I'd gone to see if anyone would do apprenticeship with me. Nobody wanted me to be an apprentice. I was like, okay, fine. So I walked into this school, which turned out to be the Art OCAD University, which is like our art and design university here in downtown Toronto. I walk in and I was like, hey, like, do you teach metalworking? And they said, okay, you know what, admissions, the application deadline is actually tomorrow, but then you can show up and like do some of our pre-work stuff because there's an interview to get in here. I was like, okay, cool. So I went down, I applied that night, you know, because I had all these transferable credits. So I was like, whatever, I'm going to get in. It's not a big deal. I applied and then went to their portfolio presentation because it's an art and design university. So you have to show a portfolio. And I was like, what is a portfolio? Like, this is so exciting.
Making a portfolio in a day.
So there was 3 weeks between that application deadline and then the interviews. There were 3 weeks. So I had to make a portfolio in 3 weeks. And it took me 1 week to understand what the heck a portfolio was. I'd never heard of it. I was like, what? So I went to one of their sessions, me and like all the 17-year-olds. I'm 25 at this time. It's me and all these like high school students learning about portfolios. And we got to do one session. So it was like portfolio plus something. So I did drawing, like life drawing. So now I'm in a room with charcoal, a naked person, and like trying to like understand, okay, shapes and like, you know, like what is this? What is happening here? And it was awesome. And so after the 3 weeks, I basically, during that time, I started to think about like, okay, these kids have had 4 years. They've all been putting together portfolios because this is what they've wanted to do forever. What am I doing that I can share my skills, but also show that I need to improve and that I need this university to take me on so that they can improve my skills and I can be awesome. And so, like I said, I was always side hustling things. So I had a jewelry business. I was just basically braiding wire. The art gallery people taught me how to like make all this little jewelry stuff. So I was making jewelry and selling it pretty well online not online, well, through Facebook at the time, but then also like at the store that I was working at, I was selling it. And like just through people, like word of mouth. So I had all of these pieces that I had made, and I would go in and do research. So someone would say like, hey, like my mom's birthday's coming up. Can you make her a piece of jewelry? And I would go on her mom's Facebook, like look through all the photos of what her mom like wore, what kind of jewelry she wore, what kind of colors she liked, all that stuff. So I would do all this like research, figure out what they liked, and then make them something, right? And then they'd love it. They would love it. And it wasn't even that expensive, but I did all this stuff. So I had all of these kind of storyboards put together with these end pieces. So I thought, okay, you know what? My pieces aren't going to be really like painting or like a sketchbook. Like I had a sketchbook, but I just took what I knew and what I had and I presented it. And I made my table out. So like, it wasn't just like a portfolio that I like handed them. I like took over the whole table and I made it kind of how we presented things at the art galleries. So I had like, you know, raised pillars and I had my jewelry on it. I had my sketchbook. I printed out like a bound cool notebook so they could like look through all of like how I process ideas. And then I did the interview, and there were 2 interviews. And the first interview, the guy who ended up becoming my teacher, he said, he looked at one of my pieces and said, we'll teach you how to finish this. And I said, does that mean I'm in? Like, am I in? So by showing that I wasn't perfect in that portfolio, it really allowed us to have a conversation on how being at that school would improve my skills and what my goals were. And my goal was really to create a knife and to create things that people could use who didn't necessarily have an arm, right? Because that was like my experience from the hospital and from the kitchen, right? And so first day, show up to jewelry studio because I got into the material art and design jewelry program. I show up and I'm all like, yeah, I'm going to make a knife. And they were like, you can't make knives. That is like actually a rule at the school. You're not allowed to make knives. It's like, okay, I'm going to make a letter opener. Woo! So just like learning about how, you know, things fit to the body, how to measure for people, you know, like you can't just like make a ring one size, like you've got to account for finger fat, like all of these things. You had to be really in touch with the user and with the person who you're building for. And then you end up with this really cool product. So I came through product design through this like super back-end channel, but it gave me experience in like 3D. I failed my first 3D class, but then came back strong the second time around, to the point where the dean was asking me to teach the class. And I was like, you know what? You guys don't like math here. I'm not into this. I need to go on a whole math adventure because this 3D stuff has some really cool applications online. And like you can really use, like you can start transforming these things on the web. And this was like 2013. And they were like, shut up, you can't, no one does that. And I was like, it's happening, like we need to get in on this. And no one was talking about it. And so I actually applied for my master's of inclusive design at the school, saying I want to create this platform where you can transform these products to fit individual needs, and they're real tangible products that then are shipped to them. They were like, you know what, I again talked with the dean, and he was like, that's awesome, but we don't have anybody here who can like mentor you and like coach you on this. So no, we can't have this. It's like, oh man. So at that same time, I had like switched my jobs. I won the election for the student unions, and I was the executive director of academic and student affairs. So I was basically involved in every single committee, every single anything that was on campus. Like I had to have like my signature on it. And that gave me the ability to be kind of the spokesperson for 5,000 students. And so I really would use their voice to then share information and get things done on campus. So that's when I perfected my one pager, because there'd be like board meetings, it'd be like the president, the vice president, all the people, and none of them would take notes. And so I would go in with like my one page of notes, put it down and say this. I wasn't even running the meeting, but I would like show up with the notes and share with them like what it is that I wanted to accomplish based on this feedback from students. And I would have like boards and I would get students to like write down, you know, what their feelings were about a very specific topic. And I would bring those with me so that they had that tangible data to go back on, to the point where I was bringing, you know, sticky notes and pens and markers to every single meeting. This was before that was like a thing, right? Now that's kind of like standard, but this was still in 2013, 2014. And I would bring all these notes, and so people would write them, you know, write down their thoughts, write down their whatever, and then we put it up on the wall. And we had these massive walls. I got us this massive office on campus, and we'd have these massive walls, and I'd have like all these sticky notes on the walls, just trying to organize like what these changes were, what was going on. And the president would come by and she'd be like, that's wrong. You'd be like, they can move. You can move it. Like, let's reorganize. Let's change this. And so it really helped me refine those data gathering and like brainstorming activities to an art that they actually use now. They still do all of that stuff. You know, I've crashed a few meetings and they're still using sticky notes, and they're like, haha, Hilary, ha ha ha. So
it sounds like you were forever ever after hearing 25 minutes of the story. It sounds like you were always all about trying to improve everybody's life, trying to be as realistic as possible. It doesn't matter how big the data set is, to gather it together, to put it together, to find, you know, points that would match across everything. And also it's kind of interesting to listen, because all of this sounds like UX.
It is.
Or in real life before internet was.
Yeah.
I'm not saying not a thing. It's more about before internet was as big as it is today.
Yeah. It really is. Because now when people think of UX, it's that really strict mindset of like, oh, it's just this app. And I'm like, no, it's so much more. Like, it's so much more than that. And that's why I find it so fascinating, and why I've been able to focus on that. Because in 2014, I shattered my leg. So I had to stop all of those things. I say stop it. I still opened up a cafe. I still was trying to hammer things. Like I tried to continue my old life and realized like I had to change everything about that. And then it was my experience then going through and fighting the academic world of like, okay, what's disability? What am I able to do? Understanding, you know, how do I now interact with spaces because I'm on crutches and in a wheelchair? I had 5 surgeries from 2014 to 2017, like serious surgeries. And so I was on crutches for so long, and like just navigating the world differently totally started to change my mindset. Like I used to wear tons of jewelry, and once I started using the crutches, I couldn't wear jewelry because it would actually hurt when I was on the crutches. So then I was like trying to negotiate my projects, because I was like, listen, this project doesn't benefit me right now. I want to be doing this because this is like going to help the world. And they were like, shut up, Hilary. I'm like, oh man. So it made me embrace technology when I had been someone who was super physical, really in people's faces, constantly like moving around, running around. You know, it made me actually have to sit on my butt for years and start to understand tech and what is like the computer, you know, what's going on here. And so I came at it from like a weird way, just because I was doing those 3D programs. I came in it from like kind of a C# programming language, then realized like, oh my God, I need algebra. So then like went back and like studied all this like algebra and math, and then kind of came back in because I've always been a writer. As you can tell, I've just talked for 30 minutes nonstop. I can talk and write like no one's business. I was writing other people's essays in school. Like we'd get an essay and I'd have to write 5 of them because it was like my friends.
Was it good money?
Yeah, right. It was always like paid in like random stuff like coffees or whatever. It was like never money focused. If I'd been money focused, I feel like it would be a different story. But I was more like, oh yeah, this is fine. I can do it really quick. Like you're super slow with this. Like let me just do it for you. So the computer allowed me to like write more, put research together in different ways, which I know both you and I have like a love of spreadsheets and like columns, and you know I love it. So that was kind of my entry into it. And then it wasn't until like I was doing like marketing for some companies, like writing for a bunch of companies, whatever. And it wasn't until my friend and I were talking, and she's like, well, I just got this job. It's like UX. It's all about UX. And it's like, what the hell is UX? Like, honestly, like, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, user experience. And she explained it to me, and I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this since 2004. Like, this is so cool. And so then diving into that with all the very subtle, like the subtleties of it, like the language, like how people are using the language. Again, like this heuristics thing is like, what? So I was trying to learn that vocabulary, and that's where Hilary Cluett's UX Vocabulary Club was born.
And which year was that? When did you
That was 2019. So that was 2019. Was that
before the best year in history?
Yeah, right? Yeah.
When you have all the time in the world and only the computer and nobody else.
Yeah. It's the perfect time to dive in. Yeah. So, I mean, since then, it's been me just using all of those skills that I had before, which is like taking initiative, being insanely curious, being relentless, and just doing things and showing up to things even when it's not necessarily like my turn or I haven't even been invited. I just kind of go and talk my way into it. That has now, over the past 3-4 years, kind of transformed this club, what the UX Vocab Club is, what it is that I offer. And I've changed it a few different times because you have to pivot, especially when you're starting. So I feel like now I'm at like my 4 years. Usually you hear, okay, after 10 years, that's when everyone's like, oh, it's been this past decade, it's been so rough, and now I have my success. So I'm like waiting. I'm just, doing little steps to get there, basically. But I found it to be a passion of mine because I really love helping people, and I love that this industry, it's still not really super regulated. So you have all these people coming in from totally different backgrounds, architects, industrial designers, interior designers, dentists, like psychologists, all these people coming in to UX from these different industries. And then basically what I'm doing now is trying to help them frame their professional stories in a way that allows them to implement great UX and get those jobs and do their thing. So, yeah.
I wanted to show the page back again where we ended here. That sounds like an amazing story. I love it. It's you can sense from the first sentence to the last one and all throughout 30 minutes that you've been built for this, and you've been doing that before it was cool, clearly. Which brings us to, so do you want to tell us a little bit about what UX Vocab Club actually is? Like, what's the goal? What kind of stuff you guys do, what it is? Might as well, as we are in that position in the story, real quick in a few minutes, and then we jump to the topic of today. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So give us an elevator pitch about what you guys do, what's happening, and what's the benefit if anybody's interested in this.
So the UX Vocab Club now, actually, we have 6,062 members. So I have to update that, which is awesome. It grows about by 300 people every month. And it's a network of UX designers and professionals. So like I said before, content writers, anybody that is even remotely interested in UX can join this club. There's a lot of information that I put out in the form of newsletters, videos, one-on-one interviews, right? Like we had just discussions with different experts so that you can start to dismantle, the ambiguity of UX and start to understand that jargon and put it into context, because the only people who understand UX jargon are people in the industry, and that's not going to help you talk to business executives or users or clients or anybody, right? Like, so it's trying to put all of these terms into context. And then it basically, I started with, helping people who don't speak English as their first language. They get these global positions and they they were starting to feel like really uncomfortable. They'd have their daily stand-ups and not be able to communicate. So I started helping them with English, but specifically about UX, right? Because you can have like your English lessons like, oh, I went to the store. It's like, okay, no one cares, right? So it's like how to make that in a business framework. And so after a few clients, I realized, oh, okay, like this isn't just actually English as a second language problem. This is like, or as another language, this is a like a global problem with people who, you know, may have spent a lot of their lives behind the screen, behind the scenes, and don't have that confidence to talk and to speak up and to share their ideas with a boardroom, or, you know, because we were on Zoom, you know, turn on their camera and be engaging. Like, how do they do that? So I started really working through some of those frameworks and like testing a lot of that stuff and seeing how I could get other types of clients who were more just like interested in improving their skills. And so basically it's split into a few different things. So the UX Vocab Club does a lot of educational material. I'm now actually working on putting out a course. So like a course that's kind of subdivided into different things. Like, oh, I want to work on my interview skills. Oh, I want to work on how I talk about myself, blah, blah, blah. Into like, you know, not like very, very affordable classes that you can take on your own. So it's not the one-on-one coaching. So that's my goal this year, is to finish those off so that people can pay like a monthly subscription or yearly subscription and get access to all that content. But right now, so other than the newsletters, the online content, that's all free. I have the one-on-one coaching, right? So that's where someone comes to me who's like, hey, I have an interview and I want to work on my interview skills. Help me. We take 3 sessions. We do it. And I've got great success with that. I love helping people with their interview skills. So that's awesome. And then I have workshops where I can go in to help teams. So like if you have a team, you're the team leader and you've got 2 people on your team who just suck at giving presentations, you can't just go out and say like, you suck at giving presentations and you're bringing the team down, right? There's other ways to do that. And one of the ways is they usually have an educational budget. So then they can bring me on and I can coach the entire team on how to give better presentations and how to communicate better as a team, how to understand those team dynamics, you know, between each other, so that there's less conflict and more execution, like more things that you can take action on in a positive way. So that's kind of the workshop side. And then just recently, because all my clients, like I'd always hear them talking like, oh, my recruiter. And I was like, what the heck is that all about? So I reached out to a bunch of recruiters and I said like, hey, like I have, you know, over 6,000 candidates who are awesome, who, you know, I can vouch for, who I know. How can I start linking them up with you? And the recruiters that I talked to were like, you're super niche. Like UX, that's super niche. Like you should be a recruitment firm. Like, why aren't you a recruitment firm? I was like, you're right. Why aren't I a recruitment firm? Oh my gosh. And so they gave me like the list of like how to do it. Rose gave me the list of exactly the steps I had to take to become a recruitment firm. So that's been like the most recent change for me, is so now I have this extra side where I basically put up polls on LinkedIn to see who's looking for a job. I send them for an assessment call, and that assessment call is with me. And I learn about themselves. They present a case study, they present the portfolio, they answer 5 typical interview questions, and then they do a 10-minute whiteboard challenge. So it's like all the stages of an interview combined into one like really jam-packed 45 minutes. But it gives me a chance to assess them out of a score of 25. So I can place them between like, okay, you should be an intern. Okay, you're an expert, or junior, senior, like where am I placing you? And it gives them a chance to reflect on their skills, because we video it and then they can go back and watch that video, which a lot of people don't do, but it's a really great way to improve your skills quickly. I'm sure you know, like when you watch your videos, it's like, whoa, I had no idea I did that. So it's that's one of the tactics that I use for them. And then, you know, if they need to work on specific skills, they can do one-on-one coaching with me. If they just want to go for the jobs, we can go that route too. So that's kind of this triple helix thing that's starting to morph, and that's why I can see it has legs. Like I know it'll just be like a little bit of a runway, but I'm starting to see things happen nicely where I have like my systems in place. I'm not always scattered. Now I'm working on those courses because I've done the user research, I've done the testing, I know what's working, what people are asking for all the time, what's consistent. So that's kind of, it started off just being a club where like I wanted to understand and help people, and now it actually has some structure to it.
Sounds like this is gonna be something that's going to be growing even more and more, because there's like those hubs of different things that's happening. Not only still have a lot of shaping to do, but at the same time they supplement each other like in a very sustainable way for everybody, for you, for the community, for everybody. And that brings us to today's topic, which is so we had this Twitter feed, and I had this experience where I started noticing that sometimes when working with UX designers or designers in general, they might kind of push for a specific way of doing things, and then trying to avoid data that kind of can prove or disprove or show no correlation between things. And I kind of started asking on Twitter, hey, is this just my personal experience? I just got lucky with a few guys that are just sometimes just say, this is how it's going to be. Okay, can we gather data about it? No, I said it because I'm a professional, you know. And I'm like, wait, but I seen the data that that's not the way, you know. So, and Hilary replied, was one of the replies about heuristics. Am I saying it right, by the way?
Yeah, heuristics. It's a super weird word. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we started chatting, and we decided, hey, let's take it to stream. Let's chat about it. So let's jump directly to it. So tell us, what is it? What's heuristics? What's the idea behind this whole concept of this behavior of avoiding sometimes the actual analysis and just making a decision? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I think I feel like this is like one of those miscommunication like breakdowns, is because if they're the professional and they're using heuristics, then to them it's justified, right? But you don't know the context, you don't know what they're pulling from, you don't know the data, and so to you it just seems like an opinion, right? And this is where UX designers differ from like a typical graphic designer or someone else, because they actually should be showing data and describing it in a way that makes sense for everybody, right? It's not just like, oh, this is my expert opinion, like here's why. So basically heuristics were developed by this dude Jacob Nielsen. He's super popular, Nielsen Norman Group. Don Norman wrote that book, Everyday Things, or Design of Everyday Things. I don't know. The two of them are like bigwigs. Now, I think that they've done a really great job. I really love all their research. If you need any sort of like data, you can always go to their site, the nielsennormangroup.com, and they have tons of articles, tons of research. I find it interesting because people now kind of rely on heuristics. So heuristics are just like, they're developed kind of as rules, if you want to call them rules, or like ways of doing things that have been proven in the past that work, right? And so we can kind of refer back to those. So when you don't have necessarily user data to draw on, like your company is like really small. Yeah, exactly. Nielsen Norman Group. It's a huge site. It's massive, and everyone refers to them. Yeah, there's the Design for Everyday Things. Like it's crazy. So they basically describe behaviors that have been seen in the past, that if your company doesn't have the budget to have like 5 user tests or 10 user tests or whatever, you can go back and say like, okay, I'm going to audit this site based on heuristics, and using those insights, we can make improvements that will change this experience in a positive way, whatever. So, some of them are like, keeping users informed, right? So like, where are they? Is this like a 5-page, like a 5-screen application process, and like they're never going to know where they are? Like, where are they in the heuristics, or where are they on this platform? Like, keep them informed about that. Another one is like, speak their language, right? So if I am an academic person and I'm trying to speak to, older people who, have no idea what my subject is about, I'm not going to use my academic terms to talk to them about it. I'm going to share it in a way that they can understand, right? So words that they can understand. That's not necessarily using like monosyllabic words, but it's not using your like academic acumen that like nobody cares about. It's how to talk to people properly, right? So also about freedom. So like they talk about user freedom. So like, can you undo and redo options? Like if when you fill out the form and then you like can't go back, you're like, wait, what? And like that kind of drives that panic. So that's a heuristic. It's like, okay, support this freedom. Following platform conventions, right? So people like consistency. And if you have something that's super consistent, they'll be able to also pick it up and be consistent. So these are the types of things that can come across as opinion, like, oh, this isn't consistent with our other platform. And you're like, well, but we're trying to make something new. And they're like, no, in my expert opinion, it's not consistent and we have to make it consistent. And so you can have those kind of battles, right? But if they bring in some of this data to back it up, like, okay, based off of these heuristics, consistency and standards is something that has been proven to be effective. We might want to think about implementing it here, right? And kind of bring people into a conversation as opposed to like an opinion-based argument, right? Like you want to have a discussion or a debate. Error prevention, right? So just like I was trying to prevent people from typing in improper information, like how can you prevent errors from happening? And also present like confirmation. So before like a big thing is supposed to happen, like show them, okay, you've agreed to this. Do you know that you've agreed to this? Okay, let's confirm it. Making things visible. So this is why we see icons everywhere. Like on the Google Sheet, you'll see like a star or the drive symbol or the cloud or whatever. That's like so that we don't have to remember, oh yeah, Google has a cloud. We can see it, so we're recalling the information as opposed to having to store it in our brains, right? And like keep all that data, because there's like super cognitive overload nowadays, right? Like we have like 1,000 things on our screen, whereas before that wasn't the case, right? It was like a little line. So it's making things visible without overloading them. So there's a fine line there. Flexibility. So allowing people to tailor their experience or tailor actions, or, if something's really frequent, adding that in kind of as a feature. That's kind of where features are born. It's like, oh, we're seeing this person do this all the time. Like, is there any way we can make that shorter, cut down their time? And what else? Aesthetic, aesthetic. I mean, that's super subjective. Like that's the most subjective one ever. But it's basically how can you provide relevant and timely things as needed. So whether that's dialogue, whether that's, an animation, whatever that is, like how can it be relevant and timely and not overwhelm someone? So everyone has opinions on what that looks like. You talk to marketing, they want it to be super flashy, awesome, like all these animations. You talk to a writer, they're like, it can just be a Word document. You're like, oh, okay. So it's aesthetics is refer to your style guide basically in the brand guidelines, and then you're going to understand that a little bit better. And then also just expressing in plain language. So like, how we always would get like the error 404, like codes. You're like, well, what's that error mean, right? So it's like expressing that in plain language, like, oh, you forgot to, or like, oh, sorry, our mistake, like our server's down, or whatever that is. Like, because people don't speak engineering codes, they speak plain language. So just using plain language. And then also being able to provide helpful additional information. When you see that little like icon that has like the question mark, or talk to someone, chat with someone. So basically those are like the basics. So if you have no way of collecting data, or you don't want to collect data when you just want to like get on with a project, those are kind of like the basic qualities that designers will fall back on, hopefully will fall back on, to evaluate a current project or evaluate like mock-ups or whatever stage they're at of their fidelity, like lo-fi, hi-fi, whatever. They can refer to that and say, when they're giving pointers, say like, okay, we haven't really informed the user where we're at right now, or like, oh, this error message is really confusing. Like, does anyone else get this message? Like, can we change this? So they can refer back to that. But when they're not saying what it is that they're doing and they're just saying like, this is my expert opinion, that to me screams ego.
Yeah, exactly. Just change it. Yeah, I know. I'm listening to you, and I know, guys, exactly like you explain, like the whole, look, this is how it is, then explains, then backs up with logic, then shows 7 examples from other places that already done that. And in my industry, we sometimes fight a lot about phrasing, wording, headings, things like that. Same works for SaaS companies, not SaaS. Doesn't matter, within the product, on the marketing side, where it is, you sometimes have to force founders or developers to change words that they've been using for maybe 7 years and say, we don't call that way anymore because no user will understand it. And that's coming from an SEO. Because I just sit down and start working and like, well, you came up with this cool idea, but nobody in the world knows what it is. And trust me, it's better if we don't teach them. Because then every time we write a paragraph, we have to add that one sentence explaining the word that nobody will know. And that will happen across hundreds and thousands of pages because we cannot assume that they saw it somewhere else, So you remind me of these kind of coolest guys I've ever worked with, which is be always like, having a very data-driven discussion without actually kind of gathering user feedback. It's more of a, hey, here's a few examples. Look what I found. I actually found something better than I expected in that part. But sometimes, as you say, there's another type of UX designer or designer in general that might come with some ego and says, hey, just change it to that. Why? Yeah. Just change it. Okay, but why? And that's, I think, but I think in any industry, if you cannot explain why something has to be done to a 5-year-old, then probably don't neither understand nor whether or not that actually needs to be done. It's just your educated guess,
Yes. And so that to me, exactly, it screams the ego and then that fear of being wrong, right? So like, they're like, oh, well, this is how it's done. You're like, okay, but why? And so I actually started asking the but why question a lot because I was seeing, I was hearing from there's 6,000 UX designers in my network. Some of them speak differently about their products. So I was always asking like, okay, like where are these laws coming from? So then you have these 20 laws of UX that even kind of expand upon it. It's like Fitz's law, Zeigarnik effect, blah, blah, blah. All these rules and things that people were using to describe their portfolios. And I was like, okay, check it out. That's great that you know what the Zeigarnik effect is, but like I have no idea what you're talking about and I'm not in the mood for a lecture. So you need to explain this to me as if I don't know, which I don't know, and like use very simple terms, please. And so that actually led me in 2021 to do one video every single day. I like would wake up, write out the thing, make a video, publish it, like put it out there. No one's watched them, like they're just whatever. I was really doing it to like gather the transcripts and gather the text data without having to like write out millions of words. So I went through all these laws. And I was just questioning them. I was like, okay, but like, how do we know that that's true? How do we know that this 80-20 rule is something? Like, what is that? Like, and so I started really questioning it and I would dive in. So I would end up doing 3 videos a week all about these different laws. And it took me, like almost the whole year to go through all of them. And
where we get
that, pardon?
Are they available to see?
Oh yeah, they're all over the place. So I have some on YouTube. I have them all. Like I'm trying to like release them in a way. Actually, the laws of UX on my YouTube channel, I took every single video that I'd done just about the laws and I put it as one large video. It's like 4.5 hours on my YouTube channel. And it's like It's me in a different outfit every single day, just like yelling about the laws of UX. It's yeah, but that it really started to open up my mind as to like, okay, I just started hearing the same things over and over again. So I realized that people weren't actually going into the laws of UX. They were just reading abstracts, and they were reading someone else's summary of what this study was. And that just blew my mind. That blew my mind. I was like, oh, whoa, like I don't do that. I like go in, I need to know what I'm pulling from, right? Because I'm not satisfied to just be like, these are the heuristics, these are the laws, this is what we do. That does not satisfy me. You can tell after those 4.5 hours, I'm unsatisfied. So the way that I started going into it was like some people would mention a book, or Nielsen Norman Group would like cite a book. So I started reading those books. And the one that stood out to me really like hardcore was by Daniel Kahneman, and it's Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a beast of a book. He's like a statistician, economist, I think. So like he's coming at it from a totally different angle, but he's coming at it from the data points, right? And so it turns out a lot of these studies that we're basing the laws of UX on were conducted like at a university with university students, and are now like cited like one time. They were never repeated. They couldn't be repeated. That's not science. So they were used kind of out of context, and now are being cited out of context because like that's a very specific group of people, right? They have a very specific agenda, whether you like it or not, right? And like we're citing these things as laws now to like dictate how we use technology, how we do things. So it was really interesting to read his book and to see like, oh, we should actually question data. And even when someone's coming at us with a really, really good reason why they think, and possibly 7 examples of it, we should still ask one to do user testing. Like just go to a coffee shop and just get anybody. It's called guerrilla testing. Like go to a coffee shop, get anybody to try it, and just see where they get stuck. Because when you're starting, like it's all being this like really closed network and framework that it's all happened under. So to me, that's just like super biased opinions. And these heuristics kind of like are very biased. And so yes, a lot of them do work, and yeah, sure, we can say that, but it's really interesting to like dive into like the actual details of it and realize like, oh, like we're citing these wrong people. Like the abstract is not the paper, and the paper says something very different than what we're now preaching. So many people don't do that research though. They don't like understand that. So then they're just like talking about it. So then that's all perpetuating, it's oh my God. It's just like spiraling snowball.
And you can only fixate on how beautiful it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Pass away all other things and then say, hey, is it great looking?
Yeah, exactly.
And even that's unsolvable, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why aesthetics is like, it's such a big part of it. And to me, it's like the stupidest part of it.
For me, the same. Like when I work with SEO and in general with teams that run software projects and things like that, it's always the last thing. Who cares what kind of color? You think it matters? Yeah, maybe the user likes orange, but at the end of the day, as long as it's not like white, as long as it's next to a white button, who cares what color it is? Trust me.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I would have like personally, like from my experiences, the biggest issue is that those who might not think from user perspectives, as in different user, different behavior, different knowledge in computers, different softwares they used before. Some of them maybe used little, different ages, and a lot of things. Those people usually, those UX designers usually have a little bit more open mind compared to maybe those that, there's only one way and the user only will use it this way. Trust me, users will find cheat codes, and if they exist. From when you're an SEO, the hardest thing sometimes to explain to those people that are avoiding everything is connected to everything, and anything can be used as a hammer, even if it's a vinyl, or something. you have to, for example, explain when it comes to we move to web design, right? That user most likely will not come from homepage, from anywhere else, but not the homepage, and they are sending you these extensive user flows of how from the homepage they're gonna move there, and they're like, oh, you're starting backwards. Opposite, like flip it. It's gonna and and that's kind of. I'm actually also like I have good friends that are actually friends, not only colleagues, but good friends that do that in a sense that I understand and I can communicate with without having that ego issue as we discussed before. I really actually I am as excited as you are about this because it's I don't want to do it for a living, but I'm excited to be part of. Hey, we're gonna try to improve things. Still, 80% of the stuff will be a mess always because it's big, but we're just gonna move needle by needle, data point by data point, and we're gonna find, and when we have those conversations, then we get these kind of amazing best results, because I might make some sacrifices on the website or on SEO side of things or content or things like that, but I was gonna not allow you to drop out the most important details because otherwise the users will not find, so who cares? They also make some sacrifices in, hey, maybe this would be better that way, but we still need it, and that's kind of when both sides make some sacrifices and then match their energy together. It's the best projects I've ever touched happen this way,
Yeah, because it's that debate, right? It's like, okay, like that's actual true collaboration. It's not like, oh no, I say it's this way. I have a lot of clients who I work with who will say like, oh, but my product owner, my PO, my PM, they said it's like this. I'm like, oh. Did they? And it's like, well, how did you present it? How did you talk to them about it? Did you give them an option to say no? Like that's your first mistake, right? So it's trying to have that conversation where, just like I was negotiating my projects, that people would get their syllabus and think like, okay, this is it. I would go in and negotiate it and be able to do other things to demonstrate those abilities based on my skills, right? So it's really this constant conversation that you're having with people, and you can't have your ego. You have to back it up with proof of something. And when you talked about the journey map, honestly, so since starting the recruitment firm, I now see like lots of I had to limit it to 2 a day because I was doing like 8 a day and I was just exhausted. So I have it now limited to 2 a day, and I'm booked out to like mid-July, right? So I'm like, okay, fine. And it's assessment calls. And so I see how people present their case studies. I see how people present their portfolios and how people talk about their project experience. It's wild. Like, honestly, like I don't know what template everyone's going off of, but for the most part they are identical. And then how people describe it is like, here are my wireframes, this is my journey map, here is my
what's identical about them? What kind of
they're not giving any details. There's no details, and they all start from, here was the problem statement that we were presented or that we made up. Like, oh god, like, okay, thanks, great. Then like, okay, so my role was this. I was the UX designer. Great. I worked with this team. Okay, cool, whatever. No one cares. Like, then it's like, so to start, we did a little bit of secondary research, which means they read some papers and they looked at Nielsen Norman Group, essentially. And then found out that these would be the best places to begin. So then we started with, some of them start with like, this is what they wanted. So this was our brand identity. This was all this stuff. And then we did some mock-ups. So based on that secondary research, I did some mock-ups. But they're like, you see how I'm not giving you any details? I haven't told you exactly who the person is that you're solving this for. I haven't made you care. In fact, a lot of the time it's like, whoa, like, hey, this is my job. I'm focusing right
I'm
now.
listening to this and imagining myself, maybe not in a position where there's like C-suite executives just sitting there, but like any even smaller company, 20 people or something, right? And there's like a CEO, there's like COO and a few other guys that are like the decision makers, right? They're just and one of them is usually way much more a decision maker than others due to reasons. They can be the founder or they can be... And I know where you're going with this. It's really hard because they as we just were joking around, they're interested in the beauty of the product.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing they can evaluate if they don't spend hours and days and weeks and months staring at the same wireframe, trying to get it right. Because that's what happens, right, when you're a designer, any kind, web designer, any product designer, material, so you're making products, whatever you're doing, it's always the same. I'm spending, same with SEO, I spend in your website, doesn't matter if you're a client to me or I'm part of a team or whatever, I spend usually in your website or staring at your competition compared to your website way much longer than you do. And I know stuff that I would need 2 hours to start getting there, just of before information explained to get there. And I can sense where you're going with this. It's really hard to dissect all of that and to make people care about things that you want to prove. Because they don't, by default,
they don't care at all.
Because they didn't spend 3 weeks now in a room staring like this at one wireframe.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, I love talking to C-suite. I love talking to CEOs. I love being at the boardroom table and like sharing my opinion. And the most effective way to do it and to get them to care about it, you have to, have something beautiful or visual there, right? So that's why I would always bring that page with the notes. Like I always had something that like had an image on it, had my notes, had space for them to take notes on, right? And a pen for them. So it has to be visual. It also has to relate to how they're going to make money or how this will impact their bottom line, because ultimately it's them spending money, getting money, asking for money. There's always money involved. So like it has to touch on that somehow. And then they also are doing this for a specific group of people, right? So like they have a client in mind. UX designers have taken this to a whole other step and started making these personas. I have a serious problem with personas. Like, I hate personas.
Say it.
I think it's the dumbest shit ever. Like, if you're taking, so you get like 20 different people. Usually they only interview 5. You interview 5 people. You take all their pain points and you melt it all together into this one typical user who's not a typical user. You've just taken 5 different people's pain points and put them into one person. And now you're giving them a demographic. I do hate personas. You're giving them like a specific demographic, which like is super interesting. You're like taking a lot of details and you're putting it and presenting it in a way that like, this is who we're after. And they used to do that a lot when I was a brand ambassador. You know, they'd give us a sheet. You're like, I was an Axe Angel for a while, you know, Axe body spray. So I was an Axe Angel, and they would say like, okay, your target is 14 to 17-year-old boys. Go. So if you see anyone else in the mall, you don't care. You're just like targeting these young guys, right? And trying to spray them, trying to give them the X-Ax or whatever. So like, I understand how people, like the business has a target in their mind and then where personas kind of came so that you can be like, oh, okay, like here are their pain points, here are their problems, da-da-da. But like, that's such a boring way of describing someone's problem. Like, it's so much easier to say, okay, because they give them random names. They're not actually people. So when they're quoting, they're not actually a quote from this persona. They're a quote from Phil. Right? So it's like, Phil has this problem. And actually when I won a fintech competition, like hackathon competition thing. I had no idea what fintech was. I just went in and was like, okay, cool. Ended up winning it. I gave the winning presentation. And everyone else was presenting their ideas, you know, and it was like a pretty serious judging panel. Like you got into this incubator, all this stuff at the like Rotman School of Business in Toronto. So it's like one of our best business schools here. And they all had their master's degree, and I just like show up in this like awesome dress gown thing. Like I had no idea what I was going to, so I was like way overdressed, but whatever, it's fine. And it was over 3 days. And the first day I went home, when I was the last one picked, no one wanted to pick me because I was like dressed way out of proportion. So the last team came up, they're like, we need you on our team because you're the last person, so we need a 4th person. You're on our team. I was like, cool, whatever. And they already had a product, and I was like, great, send me the website. So they sent me the website, and I basically spent that whole night, just like you said, scouring their website, going over every single detail. And I came the next day and I said, okay, show me your presentation. What do you have so far? What have you done? And he started with like some problem statement, some stats about something random, all this stuff. And at the end, I was like, okay, I still, like, from your presentation and from your website, I have no idea what you do. I still have no idea what you do. And I said, can I just read this book. Like, it was like getting rid of ineffective data. It was another title, but it was like how to cross off things, like how to make, graphs well, and how to not overwhelm people with information. And so I go up and I just drew like 2 dots and a smiley face, okay? Like on a Google slide, 2 dots and a smiley face. And I was like, this is Phil, okay? He wants to travel to Florida every winter when it gets too cold in Toronto. He's got this awesome property that he wants to rent out, but he's not going to be there to transfer the keys and let in his Airbnb. He also has no idea how to take photos and put them on the internet and, run this hosting site. So this company, the one that I was promoting, comes in, takes the photos for Phil, handles his keys, handles the cleanup, and just takes 25% of the whole Airbnb fee. Like, this is how Phil makes money. And then showed a graph of like what their projection was, basically. And then basically like asked for questions. And they were all like, oh, cool. And so we had like this conversation, right? When then the finance guy or the tech guy could like answer some of those subtle details of like, okay, well, how does this connect? How does this not, whatever. But it was just this simple story about Phil. And it was just these 2 dots and a smiley face. Because if you show a smiley face, people smile. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to show Phil smiling. This is great. And everyone was like, no, that's not going to work. And I was like, this is going to work because no one cares about anything else that you're talking about. And I'm going to give the presentation. So let's do it. And that's the same approach that I always tell people to do when they're giving their case studies or when they're giving their portfolios or doing whatever. You don't start with this like massive business problem, one that I've never heard of. 2, usually they include jargon that's like very specific to some very specific industry that, like, again, I haven't heard of. And then they're showing these personas that aren't somebody, they're everybody combined into this one specific demographic.
But also way too specific to make sense.
Way too specific. And it's just
why
like,
is he 37 now? Like, why not 16? Because he can have to see his parents left him a house and he's doing the same at age 16. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Like this.
The way you explain this, I think UX designers would learn, and I agree with your attitude, honestly, because I've been there watching those slides about. So this is Jessica, and Jessica is, and this is way too specific. And I know from experience, it makes no sense.
Makes no sense.
And that experience, my personal one, is in SEO, we have search intent. So that basically means thinking what kind of issue and how would they type that into Google and preparing for that. And if you don't match search intent, you definitely don't rank. If you match it, because Google algorithm is very good at determining just by the thing you typed in, the way you typed it in, what kind of problem are you having, and suggesting new stuff. That's why one word difference can sometimes give very different results. For example, best gaming mouses. You will most likely find an article that lists out and analyzes like a listicle of different gaming mouses and how they match to each other. And this is one for budget. This is one if you have all the money in the world. This is one if you want 20 buttons on it. This is like that. But if you type in gaming mouses, just remove that one word. Then you suddenly need a category page on e-commerce website that sells mouses because you just want to click and buy. So basically, in the first one, you're still in research phase, and then the second one, you're buying it. And now, can you tell me what age group, what color of hair, and what sex the user was that looked for a gaming mouse? No, you can't.
No, so and it doesn't matter.
Why waste time on that? But
it's
we can
situational.
understand their pain point, and we should determine. So that's why your Phil smiley face kind of reminded me that's exactly what search intent is.
Yeah.
It's legitimately Phil owns a house, wants that. How he would type it in to Google to solve this problem. And we very specifically understand the problem, so the search intent that they're having, but we don't need to know details about Phil trims his beard 2 times a week.
Like, unless if you're selling razors, like that's not your problem, right? It's very situational, and I like that term in SEO, search intent, because I find that situational, like Phil, like that's a situation, right? And I could give you another example of, Samira. Samira has an apartment and whatever, like she goes, and it's essentially the same story, but like it's with different people, right? And I think that it's a different way of speaking. You can make it more concise. It's in a narrative, so people are like, oh, but what about Phil, right? So like when you're going and talking to the engineering team, you're talking to the SEO team, you can have these real conversations, which that's essentially what a persona is supposed to do. And then everyone's like, oh, my personas are used by like the company still, and And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's really like I can't stand it.
I'm listening to you. It sounds like UX is such a young industry, just like SEO, honestly. Just maybe SEO has some sort of possibility. Maybe it's one day to die. Even though I don't see it in very near future away, because nothing changes the as soon as we got the power of typing in questions, now we need people that ask us questions that they can Google. Because just, literally 5 seconds later, you're gonna get the answers faster than I will be able to explain. So, but it kind of, listening to you, it seems like we have these practices in UX in general, and in design in general, and web design and web standards, let's call it.
Heuristics.
That will be very much reevaluated so many times in the nearest future. And as this seems like, just like product design or material design, as a bigger section of it, was a thing for quite some time, even if it's in Middle Ages and somebody's making a spoon. Well, if you make an aerodynamic, handle, and that makes it easier to take the soup out, you're already a much better, person that makes spoons.
Flat spoon versus like a spoon, like.
It seemed like it's UX design. So it seems like we're just kind of opening up a future where, just because of all this data that we can get and all these tools that we can see people on our website clicking on things and just rage quitting after they see your prices, for example. You can actually start thinking a lot about a lot of things. And even business people, I see more and more adopting this. Like, I know I'm doing it with my practice, and I imagine you would do it with yours. Also, I see teams doing that, as in, just as SEO data becomes part of market research, because you can come to me with many business plans, and I can disprove them for you. I have that. You can still try, and I'm not saying that other sources of traffic or other ways to sell this product that you might find will not make your business a success. But I can tell you that by default, nobody has this problem, because I can check search intents and I can say nobody's looking for it.
Nobody's looking.
5
exactly.
people in the world in a month that might or might not be maybe interested.
It's really, that's such a good data point just to even start with, is like, and that's a lot of UX writers and content designers actually have to go there. They have to go to like something like Google Analytics and like okay, or trends, Google Trends, right? And like search in, so that you can see like, okay, what am I putting on this call to action button? Are people asking for, this really specific razor, or are they saying shave now, or what is that they're looking for? And then using that vocabulary within your external documents. That's not to say that people can't have their really cool, creative, awesome words in their internal documents that they're using within the company. But when they go to public face, you're not re-educating the public on what it is you're doing, because that's a whole other segment of things. That's kind of where I'm like I find that, like I said, like a lot of UX designers have awesome ideas. They have like the best intentions. They're super researched, they're super knowledgeable. A lot of them have master's degrees now and whatever, like they're coming from all these like really interesting backgrounds, but then they can't describe and explain their ideas in a way that would interest the C-suite, let alone their POs and their PMs. And that's actually my forte. I can talk, I'll get up on a stage and I'll talk. Yeah, sure, I get butterflies, but like, it doesn't bother me. I can talk to anyone. I've had a lot of practice doing that. I've been given scripts and then told to go up on stage like within 5 minutes of receiving the script. So like, these are things that I'm not fearful of. And so as a result, I've done a lot of practicing and I've desensitized myself to this. And I've seen boardrooms where people get bored. And I can see why they're getting bored. It's because they're being overwhelmed with stats and data, because you can't just approach it by data. You can't just say 100 of our users said this. It's like, okay, but no one cares. Like, what did they actually say? What's the problem? And where is it specifically happening? You know,
you would think you're based what I'm hearing. Let me rephrase that and say yes or no. And like, would you think that UX design is currently now in a stage where they're not catching by default, most of them, let's say, not everybody, they don't catch the golden middle ground and waste everybody's time with too much detail on things that maybe don't matter that much, especially if you're presenting or pitching your ideas. Things like, is Michael a ginger or is he not, and like tiny side things like side quests. And then on the other hand, way too many fixation on some sort of or details or things like that. So basically what I'm trying to say, they're kind of similar, but instead of just talking, this is a problem, this is a solution, this is that, questions. And then if you have questions, I can go to Simon's here, and we can also move to very specific, why this button has this shade. In general, why is this grayscale, filter is set here and things like that. But we're not starting there.
No, that's where everyone starts right now.
Yeah, so you would say they start in those two areas and walk 100%. Around the house and never
get
go
to
inside.
The actual detail, which is why I think a lot of UX contracts are so short. A lot of UX contracts, it's 3 months, like 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And then everyone I talk to is like, oh, but my contract ended. I'm like, did you not ask them to renew it? Like, what do you mean your contract ended? Oh, I gave them all the details. I gave them everything. It's like, wait a minute. Like, I've had people like at the hospital. I went away for a month to Europe, came back to the hospital. They're like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm back. Hi. they were like, no, you don't work here anymore. I was like, let's go talk about it. So we went and talked about it in the office. And I said, like, my desk hasn't changed. You clearly haven't been through any of that paperwork. You're still having these problems. So bring me on. You're going to train someone? You're going to take them 6 months to train someone to be able to do what I can just do and start right now within the next 10 minutes if this doesn't take too long. And they were like, okay, we'll bring you on 2 week by 2 week basis. And I was like, perfect. And so every 2 weeks I just go back and say like, okay, this is the progress I've made. Here's where we're at. And here's where I project I'll be in the next 2 weeks. And I just kept doing that to the point where they hired me back on. They wanted me back full time. They had me teaching everybody how to use this program, how to do all this stuff, giving all the presentations, talking to the C-suite about where the limitations were and where the problems were. And then I just wanted to spend all my time on the campus that I just fell in love with. So I ran for the student union and just left, right? But it was, it's interesting. Like, I find it really interesting that like a lot of designers, it's like, they have all this compassion, all this awesome ability, right? Like some of them are super creative and some of them, love doing the sketches and love doing all that stuff, but it's not about what you love doing. It's about how are you helping this business solve their problem? And like, they're actually paying you. And that's a huge deal right now, especially with all of these like no code tools, all these things that they can use really quickly to get their ideas done. If you're not actually adding business value at every single point of your day, like people can yell at me all they want about this, but like you're not going to renew your contracts and you're not going to be hireable, because like people don't want you fiddling around on your portfolio piece. They want something that they can take action on and start earning money from, or start making some sort of benefit to the whole company. Like whether that's an internal dashboard, everyone's like lost on the wiki. Okay, design a new wiki so that everyone can get their information, right? Or that's some like searchable content on the website. They need that to be searchable immediately so that people can start using the website. My last client, like, because I sometimes do like freelancing things. When I hear people like bitching and complaining, I'm like, what's going on? Like, what are you having troubles with? And so I was like boxing, and I kept hearing the owners like talk about their site, and like I went on their site and I was like, man, none of your links are clickable. Like no buttons are clickable. Like who's doing this to you? Like, are you paying someone for this? This is horrible. And, I ended up showing them how they could improve it, how they could get on a new platform, how they could have that control so they don't have to rely on someone else whose priority isn't them, like that developer obviously didn't have them as a priority, and their business was suffering, and they're a small business. They can't afford to have 6 months where you literally can't click a button. That's insanity. So
contact us button doesn't work for a gym. That's
it's insane.
That's crazy.
I was like, this is crazy. And I was like, I just need them to stop complaining so I can like work out in peace, right? Like let's do this. And within a month they had a website, and now they have complete control over their website, and it looks great, and they're doing their thing, and it's awesome, right? So it's about knowing like where you can fit in and how you can actually solve a real business problem. I didn't take 3 weeks and describe a persona of who's at the gym. I didn't come up with a user journey that was super long-winded. I said, okay, yeah, your user journey is right now any page that they go on, there's some buttons that are not clickable, so they can't get in contact with you. They can't email you. They can't find you on Facebook. They can't, like, these buttons aren't clicking. So no matter where they're coming in from, even if it's from this app or from whatever, like, this is a problem. So it's not taking them through like the idealized user journey pain point problem. It's like, no, frequently people are having pain points because of this, and this, and how can you solve that? And then when they went from the page to the app, they were naming things differently. I was like, no, it's better if you have, this explicitly say what it says on that landing page, because then people, there is a study, it says like 30% more people will buy it. So like, go for it. Like name this button a little bit longer, or rename the title of this page, but like link those things together, because you don't want to jar someone on their journey to purchasing this product. You want them to be like, okay, this is the button I click. Okay, now here's how I pay. Okay, great. Boom, boom, boom. So just explaining that to them. They're not tech savvy. These are gym guys, right? But like having them then be able to take that on and do something with that. That's the beauty of it. And a lot of people like idealize working at these big corporations and these big companies, but they still need to make money. And as AI becomes more relevant, a lot of these middle managers, these PMs and stuff like that, they're going to be looking for jobs, because a lot of these things can be automated. You have WhaleSync, you have Airtable, you have these things that are kind of taking that position of people who used to just like copy and paste information from a lot of sources into one source of truth. Now that's automated. So like, okay, cool, like what are you doing? Oh, I'm just organizing meetings and like talking about like morale. Great, whatever. So it's like how do you present things so that people care, so that you're making a business impact, and so that you're not giving too much away. Because okay, if I give you everything, I give you my entire 1,000 frame Figma thing, you don't need me anymore. You can fire me. But if I give you pieces of it and we work on one tangible piece at a time, that's giving me longevity, because like, yes, I've attained these specific requirements. Here's what I'm thinking for the future. Is this something you guys are interested in? Okay, cool. Let's sign another 3-month contract.
And also I had the same experience. It also makes way much more sense to release fast. Just do one modal, one page, one type of CMS collection or something. Just do it, continue with the next one. And don't fix the bugs, as in, especially aesthetical bugs, like as in, oh, it's not beautiful, we have to come up with we can when it's being indexed throughout the next 3 months, come back to me. And that's, I think, where it kind of adds with this type of behavior is not only not beneficial for them as professionals, but it's also not beneficial for the team, for marketing partners, for SEOs, developers, for anybody, because when you get this, I've seen developers just lose their shit after they get this huge overhaul document. It's like, no way, I don't know where to start. It's scary. It's too much. And I've been building this particular one tool solo, developing it for 7 years. And you tell me now I have to change everything? So it's really daunting. And for marketing teams is if we have to wait for 6 months for you to come back with all website design and you don't even ask us what needs to be there because you're gonna decide, then it's really worthless. You come
Trend's
back
over.
2 months
No one
later,
cares anymore. 6 months later, get out of here.
And also at the same time, it's invaluable because we didn't kind of connect the dots. So I like your idea, and I like that you have like a community which kind of follows you for this approach of like, hey, just send them a button, just send them, maybe one page, just send them one modal or things like that. Because when people don't work that way with the marketing team, including devs, on changing, growing, and improving, and adding traffic, and basically making more money. Very simple. Then we cannot communicate. I cannot prove to you that today done is better than 2 months later better, rather than today just let's publish, and then you can come back 2 months later and I'm gonna say, hey, I created this section, look how it would be, or I created this model, it would solve this issue. But by then, we might even have data to back it up, to actually see users moving the mouse and seeing, wait, we don't need that model anymore. Everybody gets it. How? I don't know how, but they got it. They got it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really big thing. I find, everyone talks about agile methodology. They're like, oh, we're iterating. I've been iterating and iterating. And, like the next sprint, we can do this. And I'm like, okay, but like, is it out? Did you do something with it? And they're like, oh, not yet. Like, we're still working. I'm like, okay. Whatever. Like,
but isn't this a project manager, product manager, whoever's kind of job a little bit to be that?
Yeah. But then, so this is the whole thing that this is my problem.
I think sometimes they also can be the issue here.
Yeah, absolutely.
To getting things moving through the chain is really sometimes hard,
Well, because they sometimes don't understand like the whole process, and then you have designers, developers who aren't confident enough to speak up and talk about the process, and then you have these super rigid structures that were invented to not be rigid, okay? They were invented to be adaptable, pivoting, whatever, but now are these like, I went through the 5 stages of design, research, development, iteration, testing, launch. And it's just like, if I see this little 5-circle diagram one more time in my life, I usually now have my screen off and I'm like very silent throughout these presentations because like people don't see how consistently everyone's saying the same thing, which is nothing. They're not saying anything. And so it's like becoming more and more relevant to how I frame, like I just wrote a newsletter, like, why do all UX case studies look identical? Like, how do they look identical? What would I do for each point to like make it a little bit different, right? And I had some people say like, wow, I was just about to write my case study. I've been working on my case study. And now actually these points, this makes a lot of sense. Like, thank you so much. So I think it's like because it's a new industry, people don't like getting out of their comfort zones, and people are already uncomfortable talking about their work, right? Because like your work is you. It's not. It's just an experiment. You're trying something, right? Like just with SEO, like we're going to see if this search intent works. If it doesn't, we have a plan B that we can also try. That's this other word that's being used in this other way, okay? It's the same thing with any design, with anything that you're doing. You can constantly iterate and change these things, but you can only iterate and change once something is out in the wild and you're seeing how people interact with it. If you're just consistently iterating and changing on something that's not going anywhere, then it's really just your own bias that now you've been staring at this thing for so long. You're making these changes based on what? On maybe these heuristics, maybe on whatever, but like you're not sure which ones necessarily apply to the project that you're working on until you put it out there. And I think, you know, it's a shame when I see you, like some people, they'll say like, oh, this only took us 3 months. And I'm thinking in my head, like, that is so freaking long. Like, that is so long. Like, I had one time I wanted to like have an event for like a Webflow watch party. Okay. So I was like, I figured out the tickets were too expensive. I was like, oh, I want to have a Webflow watch party. So I went on Twitter and I asked like, hey, is anybody like interested in having a Webflow launch party? And people were like, oh, that's so great. Like, great idea. I was like, okay, so there's like at least like 2 people would probably show up if I like got something together. I went and I put an Airtable form together within 5 minutes, sent that out and said, okay, anyone who wants to sign up for this Airtable. Once I saw that like 12 people had signed up, I was like, ooh, I need a website so that I can actually get the funding from Webflow, like get all this stuff to like host this site, because like people were starting to respond to it. I was like, oh, okay. Got my website up. It wasn't great, but I got it up within like the day, right? It was just to like say like, hey, we're having this Webflow party. Here's the page. If you want to sign up, do this thing. And then I was able to create additional pages as the flow happened organically. So then people were starting to ask me questions. They're like, okay, well, where's it going to be? What time is it at? Which day are we doing this on? Blah, 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 blah. And I didn't have all the details. In fact, I had basically 0 details. But I created a secondary landing page that then I could email to them and say like, hey, details coming soon. You know, check this out. Like, here's the main page. Like, which events are you looking to like watch? You know, collecting more data. Next, okay, then I got funding. So then I was like, oh, okay, like I can actually afford to like rent out a space. And like, you know, does anyone have kids, or like, what do we need? And so it was like these 5 stages of giving them information, but it wasn't like I planned it out and I knew what they were going to ask me for before they did it. It was like, as it was going, I was able to then put together a page, put together these forms, collect this data, get the funding and do it. And it took, so I started it like October 10th or something. And the party happened on November 10th. So between that time, all of that stuff happened, and it was happening organically from the day of inception, right? Things were adding. That's iteration. And that's collecting data. And that's like providing business value as something is progressing, right? So that's agile. It's not like I took a month to plan out who my persona was going to be, of who I was going to invite to this party, and then decided on what sort of form I was going to have and blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, this was happening.
Yeah, and I made 7 variations of the form and decided on this one because I would fill this one personally.
Yeah, exactly. It was like people responded to this form, great, okay. And then they needed information. There was like a few frequently asked questions that were happening. So instead of me DMing everybody, you know, creating this email flow, and then what does that look like? How do I follow up? To the point where I was able to create like a follow-up page of like, hey, thanks for attending the event. Here's everybody else who attended. Here's how you can get in contact with them. Like, thank you so much. Thank you to our sponsors, like blah, 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 goodbye. And it's actually like, I presented it as a case study to my case study group a little while ago, and all of them. So I had like a junior, a complete novice, and like a really well-versed senior on the line. And it was just the 3 of us and my robot. And I presented it, and they were like, whoa. All of them were just like, I can't believe you went from idea to something that actually happened physically while using all of this like intermediate online things like forms and pages and all this stuff, and you did it in such a short time. Like, you have to tell people about this. It's like,
I honestly, listening to you and matching to similar experiences that I have, that I am also the same like you, screaming in the room today, not tomorrow, not 1 week from now, not now. Like, you just, whatever you do is good enough. Trust me.
Yeah.
But I'm listening to you, and I'm kind of, I think, spotting a pattern, which brings us to the beginning of the show where you legitimately said, hey, my name is Hilary. I was always entrepreneur spirit. And then you followed it up with 30 minutes of life story. I mean, but it's amazing, because I think that's what's missing. That understanding that if 5 people team is staling on something for 3 months, you know, and if years passes by, the project lost a few millions.
Yeah.
Just by paying their salaries, paying, I don't know, database costs, or cloud costs, paying this, paying that. Just add a few people, add a few salaries together, right? And give them 2 years of wasted time. Product is still not making money, and you lost a few million.
Yeah.
Easy.
And
so, but easy. If this is a little bit bigger, and I know this from experience, if this is at least a little bit bigger, this can be way much blow out of proportion faster. If there's a bit of more people involved, if the project itself requires quite a lot third-party tools, and then maybe even a lot of services from other things, or whatever it would be, doesn't matter. So those 2 months spent on anything that is not there, trying at least to make money, not necessarily need to make money, is just postponing any ability. Because after you reach that point where you made your first dollar, guess what? Now you have to recoup those like 2 million back before you can ask for a raise. Before you say, look what we did. Haha, give me more money. Here, Mr. CEO, now I'm going to raise my salary or improve my project or whatever. And I think this is like really sometimes I see hard to grasp for certain types of professionals, that time is money. And it's usually way much bigger money than you account for. But because even your accountant has to get paid.
Exactly.
So that's, I think, where kind of we could end. Any thoughts on that, as in general, that whole moving faster is just a way of being more entrepreneurial. And I think if we could leave with a message, some sort of, and you can add yours on top, but my message from this 1 hour, 40-minute talk would be, always think of return on investment. I had a live stream with Uros from Flow Ninja, and we were talking about return on investment design as in web design, but also there's more types of design. And the issue is that time is money, and time moves way faster. And even if you do things fast, and even if you don't make any mistakes when you do things fast, which will never happen, it's still insanely difficult, and the odds are always against you to make it profitable, to catch the right wave, to get users cheaply, not expensively, and things like that. So that whole try to put yourself out of your UX shoes or designer shoes, lean back and think, wait, he's getting paid, and somebody's paying for all this. And we're now going to waste 3 months determining whether Jack is wearing green shoes or blue shoes, because it's really important to know.
Those insignificant details that when you're in group think mode are really easy to spend a lot of time on, right? And I always say, like, okay, user experience, like, you're also like, just like you're saying, take a step back and put yourself in that user's shoes. Like, okay, well, one of the users is paying your bills. So it's like, how can you communicate with them in a way that they're getting business value every day and they're getting to improve every day, but you're still in a position where you can make those subtle changes, do that research, understand who it is that you're actually going after. If it's like a LinkedIn polls are great. They're amazing. You can't even schedule those. Like, LinkedIn polls are like, they're awesome. Like, you don't need to plan for a survey. Like at the university, they'd plan for, like, we were putting out a survey, and it took like a month to plan for this survey. And I was ready to go. I had the survey done. I was ready to go. And like, then we had to discuss all the questions and do all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And like, nothing really changed at the end. And then we put it out, and I was like, what just happened? So it's interesting, because like, when you're in the mindset of an employee, which is what everyone's like conditioned to be, right? Like, when I was in school, entrepreneur wasn't a thing. Like, that wasn't like, I was told like, you're going to be in debtor's jail. Like, no one's an entrepreneur. Like, you're not going to have any help and backup or whatever. Like, I was like discouraged from being an entrepreneur. Nowadays, people are like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm like, oh, do you want to live with your parents until you're like older and like, struggle to pay everything? not be able to go shopping or go out with friends. That's an entrepreneur.
Make mistakes that will move you back into your parents' basement by selling everything you own.
Yes.
I've been there.
That's entrepreneur.
I had to learn. There was 3 days in my life and then 2 weeks of something, and then we moved to Amsterdam with my wife. Me and my wife had a business. We had 20 employees. One day we just let everybody go, move out of flat, move 100 kilometers away back to my parents' house, sell everything, and then sit on a couch and start thinking what's next. Because we bankrupted and we put too many eggs in one basket. We're trying to diversify, but didn't got there in time. And then when that basket broke because of algorithm change, actually on social media, then 20 people are out of jobs today. Like legitimately
right now
cannot recoup everything. And
it's crazy. Exactly. And that's that ability. Like, you have to be able to take a step back. You have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to make sacrifices. But when you're in the employee mindset, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to show up for my 8 hours and I'm getting paid just because I'm here and I'm awesome. And it's like, okay, I personally don't. I work with like consultants, or I'll work on like a project by project basis, but like I can't see myself actually hiring employees because I don't like that mentality. I don't like the hour, like paying by the hour work, or like salary's fine, whatever. But like I find that people, when they have that, they tend to stretch out the work, or they tend to make it something bigger than what it is.
Because you punish productivity this way.
Yes, exactly.
If I'm really good, insanely good, and I can move insanely fast, and I'm, like you say, like Hilary, I can have your website with the form, with the first version up to date, and 2 days later, make it 5 times bigger, the website, because we added 5 pages. Then, why not spend 5 weeks on that? Why not get paid for 5 weeks and just be
just chill on it. I can't move like that. Like, I've actually I've had to bring my to-do list down from like 30 things a day to like 5, and like actually like take a chill pill and be like, okay, like what's important here? Like, let's exercise, let's read, and not just like run as fast as I can, because I'm totally like a racehorse that way. Like, I just like out the gate, like have an idea, like I'm trying to do anything I can to like iterate, like make this experiment, whatever. And I'm not afraid of failing. Like I always make mistakes. It's totally fine. But learning from those and then not making them again is kind of progress, right? And so I also don't have a problem like telling a whole room of people like, oh, I've made a mistake. Oh, this is wrong. Like, that's fine also, and I think that holds a lot of people back. So just, going back to your point, how to wrap this all up, it's like, okay, so if you're a designer, if you're UX interested, you don't even have to be in the industry. You're just interested in users, think about it from the point of who it is that you're talking to. And this, I always go back to this, like, who is your audience at that moment when you're trying to describe something? Is it the developer? Is it the engineering team? Is it the person paying your salary? Is it your product manager? What is it that they care about? And how can you prioritize what it is that you're doing that day to give them something actionable? Not so that you can make an awesome portfolio for later, not so that it can be so perfect and pristine that like you surprise the developers and give them, stress. Like, know who it is that you're talking to and what they care about, and then frame your story in a way that allows them to care. Because if you just bombard them with data or bombard them with problem statements or jargon, like, think about that. Like, it's like when you go to the doctor and they give you this like random diagnosis that you can't understand, right? You're not as interested. You won't take care of yourself. Whereas if they're like, hey, Joe had a similar problem and like this is like, he kept using his wrist even though it was broken just like yours, and now his hand is useless. You'd be like, I don't want to be like John. Like, I need to make changes, right? So like, you need to frame it in a way that makes sense for them, that they can repeat, right? Because usually the developer is then going to have to go and talk to another group. So if you give them a lot of information, too much information, they're either not going to repeat any of it, or they're going to repeat some random shit that you did not want them to remember. So just give them like 3 points of like, okay, this is what we're working on. One of them is your task, right? Here's where I'm going to be going. This is my task. You should always end things with a task of that day, not like, here's my task for like 2 weeks from now, blah, 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 because that will change. Hopefully that changes. You know, you can't plan that far in the future. If you do, like, good luck. Like, it's always constantly moving. And so not to be, afraid of that. My dad always says, embrace the chaos. So embrace the fact that it's always going to be different, that this agile method, you know, you're constantly changing, but don't use your daily stand-ups as a time to like overload people or just talk about what you failed, what you're doing, and what you're going to do next. Like, use it as a time to share real experiences that people can capture and then repeat, so that the project can move along in a way that actually makes sense. And you'll become indispensable if you can actually communicate and you can talk to all of those different people. There's no way they're going to let your contract expire. It'll expire and they'll renew it, because if they know, okay, you know, you can go and you can talk to the devs, you can talk to the engineers, you can do this work, you can do this, you can make yourself indispensable, just like I did at the hospital. Like, I didn't have a job and I just went back in, got my job back, because I was able to have these conversations with everybody, and make it relevant to them individually, right? Because everyone has a different motive. So you have to, you know, ask some questions and get into those details, not into the details of like, should this pixel be up or down? Should this be red or yellow? Like, those are significant, sure, but those can't come at the cost of losing the storyline and losing like why this is important and how this is actually going to make money and change someone's experience. So yeah, and just like lose personas. Fuck personas. Sorry, but like lose them. Do situation-based things, because like
I'll add to this what you just said, and we're gonna end today because it's been almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
It was awesome, Hilary. I'll add to what you just said. Would also add, think if you're using, you know, SMART goals, you know, the system where you formulate them in a specific way, so it's time bound, it's measurable. Yeah. Use that, because I see so many designers. We're gonna be focusing on nobody gives up.
Yeah.
Just don't focus. We're gonna iterate. Don't iterate. Just say, I'm gonna make this by this day. This is going to be 7-button set, and developers can start implementing it next Friday, and we're going to have it done. Not, I'm going to be iterating on button design all across the... Don't, because you cannot talk this way. You cannot talk to marketing. You cannot talk to designers. And trust me, whoever is the stakeholder and is losing money by the minute doesn't like you either.
They don't like you. Yeah.
Because I've been in those shoes, both and as a colleague, both as in supporting them with some specific project, specific part, as just random colleague, just spectates from the background, and even the owner of the business that's kind of, wait, you're wasting my time, and you're wasting also a lot of money, and we cannot afford this. You have to understand that you have to be very specific of what you're going to do, because then, only then, as you just said, that's where I'm coming from, you can start arguing about what kind of impact this will have, because it's really hard to talk about return on investment when you say we're going to be focusing with no deadline in that on specific buttons, whatever, because we can't even calculate how much money this will cost us as a team, as a business, as a company, as a whatever. But if you say, hey, we're going to have this by this Friday, so it's 1 week, hypothetically, let's say, so it's going to be five days, and then developers should take and then take it from there, and then project manager can assign that and a lot of things like that. Then you are in a position where people can make choices like, okay, can we waste whatever your salary times 5 days, or whatever your project is worth times 5 days, but we're gonna have some nice buttons, because it might matter to you, but for a train that is moving on fast tracks, marketing teams working, developers working, a lot of things, customer support coming in, a lot of things happening, this might be completely waste of 5 days.
Exactly.
Ever. And that will teach you. That's, I think, the magic part.
Yeah.
That will, by doing so, you will start learning what actually makes money in this scenario. So
Yeah.
you're gonna stop gradually by making those mistakes, suggesting ideas that are just cool to have. They're not mandatory. And trust me, nobody can even test how much money we make. It's not that we're gonna A/B test this, or sometimes we theoretically can, but then we will not find any correlation because, again, search intent.
Exactly. It all goes back to search intent.
On stable numbers, there's still variations going up and down, and nobody knows. Maybe one day we just made 30 times more from ads than the other day, and it's like, will this happen again? No, never.
No,
it's just one time.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a great place to end it too, because it's know your value, and by experimenting and doing things faster and knowing what people value, then you'll understand how you fit in and where you can create more value, which is ideal, right? Just because you have a degree doesn't mean that you can spend a lot of time doing something. So
we're gonna end with this.
Learn more about value. Amen.
And just focus on that, I think, and you're gonna be growing gradually, slowly improving. Try to be specific, not vague. Try to understand that value is very specific. It's never vague. It's never, we might be creating this, because there's usually, when you focus on value, it's very easy to test a lot of things. When you focus on variables that might or might not correlate with stuff, then there's usually very hard to say there is value to this or not. Just like marketing, I think marketing was in the same spot like 30, 40 or something years ago.
Totally.
When having a billboard or a newspaper ad was the main thing. And I think UX is now having the same time. Now marketers are almost mathematicians. They're just sitting there and counting stuff, and then that's how you A/B test things, and that's how you do a lot of things. You can say, one user costs us, $5 to get or something, and then we will make this and blah, 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 because there are now tools that are more obvious than just putting a billboard somewhere and not knowing. Anybody came to my store? Nobody came to my store. Nobody knows. How would you know? Unless suddenly there's a flood of people, which once again happens 100,000 times when there's actually something really good and the campaign is really good, and then there's 1,000 people walking through the doors, then maybe then you can know. But in other ways, you don't know. It increased, decreased, whatever. Maybe it increased because the weather was different and now people are cold and they come in the store. I don't know. So I think UX is now in this stage where we're still in this early, where we can say, 100%. Hey, billboards, which in their language is buttons. But in reality, it will need to gradually go to where all other online and software and marketing and SEO and all those teams are kind of residing, where it's, math and value and math.
100%. Stats, man. That's why you got to read the stats. You actually have to go to the stats. You can't just talk about what someone said about the stat. Know it.
All right. We're going to end for today. Thanks, Hilary. This was insanely great. I really loved this. This was probably the longest episode I've ever done. 1 hour and a half is always easily happening. But almost 2. This is the longest one we had. But this was awesome. We both got to learn a lot about you as a person and where it all started and how you were kind of doing UX before it was cool. And then we later moved to some sort of topic and then sidetracked to whatever, just ranting about not spending too much time on value. But in general, I love this. This was awesome. And I think there's a lot of, we come from different backgrounds, but we can communicate about this stuff because we have experiences. So that's kind of ranty, not ranty, logical, not logical, entrepreneur-y, or just, cynic or fun or chatty or whatever this was. It's just coming from, I think, warm place in both our hearts because we love these people, and it's so awesome that you can spend so much time on certain things, but as you try to improve their communication for one particular reason, it's hard for them to find those connections with different types of workflows, different types of people. And I'm really glad that we kind of touch on almost everything
Would love to have you one more time. I think that
absolutely.
we could pick a more specific topic, and we're not going to start with your life story, so we can streamline real fast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely talking to you about this. Yeah, I can rant about this stuff forever. So it's lovely to do this with someone else who has that same passion.
Yeah, I can totally agree. Same here. It's really, I see a lot of value in this, not only industry, but in general, like in people that are doing that, be it web design, UX, because it's kind of the same thing, but also not,
Totally.
but also is, how you're
It's
gonna
all
look
information
at
architecture. It's just like divided, right? So I
it.
want to start
It's just thinking about how things operate when you give them to somebody's hands. So whether you're making X's or websites or software, or I don't know, toys for children, you kind of solving same problems, like assuming how they would behave when given those constraints. So whoever is doing that, I really love their ability, but there's just reality sometimes struck them bad, and then you're really sad to watch that. I'm really always sad to see that you really don't get it. You don't, but you, because the CEO and then COO and something is like bitching about some stuff, and you sit there like this, you really don't get what they're saying to you. And same with marketing teams, like, can you have something today? And the answer is always no. And whoa, we have to change that. You have to be able to have something today, because we don't need it tomorrow. Tomorrow we're gonna have 10 more ideas, trust me. By the time I will have either 100 new users, or we will just kind of scrap and jump to another idea because it didn't work. And if we spend now 2 weeks thinking maybe this, that, who cares then? By
There's
that
a sense
point,
of urgency. There needs to be more sense of urgency, right? And,
urgency. So value and urgency.
Value and urgency.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for joining. This was us, and see you all next week. And this was awesome. Thanks, Hilary, for coming. I'm really grateful that we had this chat. This was awesome.
Me too.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
And